Hello everyone. In this video, I want to talk about Charlie Kirk and about us as leftists. There are a lot of people who hate Charlie Kirk and who are happy that he was murdered. I understand this. The Republicans have made their entire platform the targeting of innocent people and minorities. Charlie Kirk would have understood this too, because Charlie Kirk hated. His last words on this earth were a dog whistle against non-white Americans, couched against transphobic fear-mongering. He infamously, with some other conservative hacks, came out publicly with a bold stance against empathy itself, which he claimed was a New Age invention. Charlie Kirk would not have shown grace to a trans or Democrat or leftist victim of the same fate that befell him on September 10th. So I want to be very clear before I continue that nothing in what follows should be taken to imply that I think that you should feel sorry for Charlie Kirk, and I am not going to lecture people for expressing a lack of empathy for this man. What I have found disturbing, however, is the way in which so many leftists have reacted to this event with a kind of glee, a kind of superficial, insincere glee. Let's be clear, what happened to Charlie Kirk does not help the left. It doesn't help trans people. It doesn't help immigrants. In point of fact, Charlie Kirk has never been so useful to the right-wing's persecution of trans people and immigrants and pro-Palestine activists as he is now. What happened on September 10th may well portend an intensification of violence against all of these people in America, and there is no reason to think that this intensification will somehow backfire and result in some kind of strategic gain for progressives. Accelerationists who imagine ways that the rapid escalation of right-wing policies will somehow yield the resurgence of the left are just coping. They are coping with the current horribly disadvantaged position of the left through sheer magical thinking. In fact, what has happened is that the Trump administration has been granted the ideal conditions to impose martial law, or some other draconian intensification of its persecution of the aforementioned marginalized populations. So, when people are expressing joy at what happened to Charlie Kirk on social media, they are expressing joy at what will very likely, in fact, end up being a powerful tool for their own oppression, which leaves the expression of cruelty for its own sake as the only motive. Charlie Kirk doesn't exist anymore. He doesn't care if you're happy that he's gone. But normal people who don't comprehend the significance and the violence in what Charlie Kirk and his ilk say and do see this. And to them, all that appears in the left is callousness, cruelty, and wanton, mindless bloodlust. Nothing about this helps us. But that's not what I'm concerned about. Fine. Act unstrategically. Vent your feelings without any regard for how your oppressors will use them against you. That's your right, and I can't stop you. Moreover, I don't really care to stop you. What I am concerned about is the huge spread within the left of performative cruelty as a community exercise. What do I mean by this? Enemies of Charlie Kirk not being kind in the wake of his death is normal. Victims of right-wing oppression not being gracious in response to the death of a right-wing mouthpiece whose last words were to fearmonger against them is normal. What's not normal are people who never thought about Charlie Kirk suddenly loudly expressing their overwhelming pleasure at his death as a social exercise, as something they do to fit in socially, as something they do to avoid being excluded or bullied by other leftists who are all doing the same thing. There's a rather humorous and convenient example in the case of Bad and Panada, whose community is one of the worst for this. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, when Bad and Panada suddenly realized that his own community's learned habit of Fed posting might result in penalties against his channel as social media companies react to the news, posted this, quote, "Most of you are adult children who think about politics like it's a cartoon. You do not perceive of anything as potentially having actual consequences. This is a major political action that will have major political consequences, not an isolated instance of an immoral person getting what he deserved. He will be infinitely more harmful now than he ever could have been alive. This ironic detachment will not seem so ironic to you anymore when it's used to justify violence against you far beyond what you previously imagined possible." Unquote. I find this amusing because a few months prior to this, Bad Empanada was berating Hassan Piker for advising his audience to engage in strategic voting instead of engaging in stochastic violence a la a certain Mario brother.
And if there is something that you should preach, it's that these people are ultimately fucking useless, and you're gonna have to do shit yourself.
Yeah,
So what does that look like?
Here's the thing. I
Heard of
I
Mario's
understand.
brother?
Months prior to this, he had also accused me of being a Zionist when I pointed out that there could be similar consequences to what Bad Empanada is pointing out in this post, when he was at the time encouraging his audience to do the same thing to the visiting Israeli Prime Minister. The reason Bad Empanada had to tell his audience not to Fed post about Charlie Kirk is because he had conditioned them to do so for years, only now that's a problem because it represents a threat to his channel and his income. For anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear, Bad Empanada is a self-interested charlatan with no actual values. That's not the point of this video. The point is that a lot of leftists are becoming habitually cruel despite being otherwise indifferent to the objects of their cruelty. This, I argue, is not a good thing, and to be clear, not because it is unkind or ungracious to people like Charlie Kirk. The problem is that it doesn't stop being unkind to anyone. We are becoming intrinsically, constantly, reflexively reveling in cruelty at every opportunity because that has become a condition of social acceptance in major online leftist circles. Not just leftist circles, to be clear, but also leftist circles. I probably don't need to explain this, but there is no basis in leftist theory or history for valorizing jumping for joy at people getting murdered when literally only bad things for us are going to come of it. So why are we like this? The reason why performative cruelty has not just been normalized in leftist communities online, but has also become a condition of being accepted and included in them, is not because major leftist activists and theorists who have actually accomplished anything recommended that as a course of action to us as a winning strategy, but because leftist pundits online have successfully set a precedent of bullying people who object to their own weird, violent jubilations when their political opponents suffer in order to protect themselves from any accountability for their own behavior to their audience. And let's be clear, leftist pundits who are not really leftists themselves are not held to any standards by their communities. Vosh is a sexual harasser and a confirmed pedophile. Destiny is a violent psychopath and a sex abuser. Bad Empanada is a two-faced poser who changes his positions whenever it suits him. Hassan Piker's house is way too expensive. Noah Samson's mustache is far too sexy. The list goes on. The point is that this performative cruelty not only lacks any strategic value, we have been led into a situation in which we do it reflexively to avoid negative judgments by other leftists who are also doing the same thing. And the problem is that this behavior will outlive the current political situation. These reflexive, cruel behaviors, regardless of whether they're deserved by whoever is the target of them right now, will persist into the future as habits when the situation has changed. We will start to be cruel, stupidly cruel, to other people, and not because we have reasoned that they deserve it, or because we have reasoned that there is a strategic value to doing so. No, we will do it without reasons, even despite reasons not to, because to do otherwise is to make ourselves pariahs, to make ourselves isolated and persecuted by our own side. To repeat what I've been saying in recent videos on this channel, leftists need to start thinking about what people do and not what they say they are. The French philosopher Pierre Klazowski wrote something that's really stuck with me lately. Quote, "The means that are brought into play prevail over the meaning that consciousness gives to the pursued goal. The unconscious meaning of the goal prevails over the consciously fixed meaning." Unquote. Think in terms of evolution. The adaptations that allow animals to survive their environment at one time also conditions how they adapt to future changes in that environment. Whether they fly or crawl or swim or eat plants or other animals or breathe in or out of water, not only determines whether they thrive in a current environment, but also what kinds of future adaptations are available to them. Life forms, organisms, aren't just individual expressions of genes, they are active doings of a mode of existence, a strategy of existence that might allow them to flourish at one time and might commit them to die in another. As leftists, as materialists, we know that human beings are products of their history, and that is why the material situation of human beings is what we prioritize in our discourse and our activism. We don't seriously entertain notions like whether there are essentially virtuous versus non-virtuous kinds of spirits or behaviors or ways of acting or being. We don't entertain the possibility of divine commands or transcendent moralities according to which we must regulate our behavior. We are what we do, and we do what we are. If the left, as a collective, is performatively cruel in response to people's deaths when both the deaths and the cruelty are to its collective disadvantage because performing that cruelty is the condition of being accepted within leftist spaces, the left is forced to do hate as one of its essential activities. It loses the ability to choose to hate or not to hate. It becomes mechanically determined to defend its little acts of hatred as if it were its heart. In a word, all that is left of the left is a leftish-themed fascism in which there is no capacity for any kind of strategic or creative response to new situations, because to do anything but dance like a goblin whenever somebody else suffers is to invite ostracization. The result will be a left in name only that is capable of nothing but acting as a preemptive buffer for the violent ejaculations of its self-appointed figureheads. In short, the left, quote-unquote, as a brand, will have become structurally fascist. Again, the point is not to moralize or to judge people for having or expressing honest emotional reactions to the death of Charlie Kirk. But if you find yourself expressing what you don't actually feel because it makes you feel like you belong to something else, or like you won't be accepted if you don't, pay attention to that discrepancy. That is the feeling of your spontaneity and creativity being constrained and compromised by a movement that has become hypnotized by toxic patterns of behavior that no longer serve the interests of the collective, but sacrifice the collective for the sake of its current hierarchy. If by the left we mean anything positive, and maybe in present day the left doesn't mean anything positive anymore, but if it does, it means openness to change, a willfulness towards making new things and new ways of being by which we can grow, to create, not merely to endlessly react. So be cruel if that's what you really feel. I won't judge you, and why should you care if I did anyway? But likewise, don't be cruel because someone else will judge you if you don't. That's what the right wing is. That's what Charlie Kirk was. That isn't freedom. That isn't leftism. And most importantly, that isn't you. As always, thank you for listening, and take care.